And they are so great backstage that even I had jumped, they put the right picture, right? So yeah, thank you guys, you're reactive on the backstage there. So you were not surprised that I announced NVIDIA, right? No, joking. So yeah, please have, we'll talk about now how the research game is totally changed with open source. Research has been known for open science since the beginning, right? And but like now for research, things are quite have changed for AI. So maybe we'll do a quick roundtable first about like who you are, what do you do, where are you in the research value chain, from the idea to the hypothesis, the development, the use case, right? So let's do that. We started here last time, so I may ask to start with you, right, if that's fine.
Hello everyone, my name is Olivier. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Dragon LLM. We are model builders, and we've been on the market for 15 years, initially coming from natural language processing. And we've just joined OVH Group 3 months ago. Regarding research, we've always been very active on the research topic in NLP, but also on LLM. And more particularly last year, we worked on original architecture for foundation LLMs, so hybrid architecture. That's what we've been focusing on.
Dragon LLM, a name that is known in the space. Thank you, Jan.
Yep, so my name is Jan Yasté. I'm a Secretary General of a new association called European Trustworthy AI Association. So we are a non-profit organization located in Brussels. And basically, in what we are doing is, first of all, we want to create a European ecosystem of both industrial and academic working and driving research on trustworthy AI, basically. What we'd like to do also is to maintain and develop an open source, state-of-the-art portfolio of assets. We are more talking about tools, not really building model, but customizing model. I will talk about that later on. But tools and methodology. Methodology is also is key from the industrial perspective. The third thing we are doing, because it's a key point for industrial, and we do all know that what we are doing is science and expertise. And what we are trying to do is to create a community of experts that we can help our industrial to support in the adoption of trustworthy AI, generally speaking. And last but not least, and like what you said about regulation, we try to have a strong mindset in regulation, and we are trying to contribute to new standardization related to trustworthy, generally speaking. But also, we want to make sure that we can help our industrial to comply with existing standardization and AI, of course. So basically, this is what we are. We are new, as I said, 1 year, but we are 40 members right now. We are maintaining and working on a portfolio of 30 plus tooling, plus methodology, and yeah, definitely we are contribute also to standardization, and so on.
Thank you. So the last mile of the delivery, to industrials, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So okay, perfect. And last but not the least.
Yeah, so I'm Benjamin Jagues, partner of CTO of AI at Galadream. So I think in the value chain of models, we are more close to the use cases. So Galadream, to situate us, is a tech and AI agency working with different sizes of companies. We design and deploy custom solutions across diverse sectors. Just some figures, 20 million revenues in 2026 projected, 170 people across France, and more than 800 clients. So for us, open source AI is an important topic because we are provider agnostic, so it gives competition. I think our only job is to find the right model for our clients and to customize to each client's constraints, so costs, performance, and increasingly sovereignty. I come from a background where I was a civil servant before. I worked for the Ministry of Economy, supporting innovation, and for the AMF, the French Financial Markets Authority. And so I feel connected with the issue of sovereignty and supporting the businesses around these issues. And I think a conviction that I share with you, Jan, is open source AI is just not about models, it's also about tooling, inference engines, harnesses, like coding agents, and evaluation frameworks and so on. And we need this tooling to make the open models work. And that's something that I think we can discuss later.
So 20 million revenue projected?
Yeah.
Yeah, not too bad, right? Not too bad, you know. Yeah, making revenue is so 2023, my friend. You know, like, come on. You know, just for a quick story before we start in the thing, but you know Sam Altman with OpenAI, right? He wanted to turn the non-profit into a for-profit, right?
Yeah.
And so he did all this stuff and everything, and you know, pushing hard, you know, the board discussions and trying to push on the policy and everything. And so he went on the road for profit, and at some point he said, "Oh, we just launched our $200 model, and we still lose money on this model. People are using so much, you know, like how they do that." So once one guy answered him to his face, say, "Oh, so you're still a non-profit, you know?" so just to say, no, about research. The thing is, there are two parts. This how open source AI help research, right? And how, let's say, how research can enable more open source AI, right? So that's really these two aspects. So maybe here, the closer to the early value chain is probably you, Olivier from Dragon LLM, about how you build these models, you know? Over the 15 years, you've seen many things, right? You know, pre-LLM, then post-LLM. How does your model building has changed over the last 15 years, especially into how more open source models, open source AI, whatever, open weight have been around?
Yeah, one thing that has not changed is that when you want to create models, you always need three things. You need people who know what they're doing. You need data, and you need compute. And it's been the same thing for the last 15 years. The main difference is that, you know, 10 years ago, when we were looking at translation models, the models were looking at 7 words after and several words before going to the next one. Okay, that was more than 10 years ago. When now we're looking at the full context of pages and taking all this into account. So for me, this part is very important because that's what you need. And what has changed between 10 years ago and now is that you have, in Europe, actually more and more talented people who are working and who have the skill to do this. You have more compute available. We saw this morning a presentation of the AI factories. This is a fact, you know, if you are a researcher, if you're a small company, it is increasingly easy to get access to compute from the AI factories in Europe without red tape. You know, we did a request a few weeks ago. We got the answer within 24 hours. We got access 1 week later. Okay, this is possible, and this is for free. And on top of that, you got all the resources to help also fostering the skills and the expertise as well. And the third thing that you need is data. And that's where the problem remains today. And that's where we heard the last panel, the discussion about, you know, open data, about, you know, command crawl. Is it legal to use command crawl in Europe? You know, are we compliant if we do it? You know, how much filtering do you need to do? How do you do your filter? Okay, you don't want to have a bias model. What does that mean to be a buyer, to have a bias model? Okay, I'm creating, and that goes, you know, way beyond protecting your book. It goes to more ethical problems on this. When you create a model, when you create an LLM, should you allow the model to answer by I say this, I believe this, because when you impersonalize the model, that's a bias, because that means you are going to influence people in terms of thinking this is a real person, or should you not do that? You know, all those questions are complicated. We are still far from having solved a lot of those.
And it's a really long time question, and some people here went close to me at the lunch and said, you love some literature quotes. So you used to talk about the I of a model. Arthur Rimbaud, a French poet, used to say, I is another. You know, even when he writes I in his story, it's already a projection of himself that is not directly himself. So it's a question that we've been facing for a long time. But the thing also has a question about the model discovery. You know, we had this open weight movement. We had Hugging Face, who was first a chatbot company who turned to be like a model discovery platform. Did it change also, the fact more things are discoverable, did it change a little bit how you build models?
So I'm going to be very blunt here. I'm looking at this, from a cold kind of business view on this. When you come into an industry, the US started really launching the LLMs. A lot was open source. Indeed, OpenAI at the beginning was open in the idea. Then who are the main contestants today? China, okay? It's not by chance if the most uploaded models, open source models now are the Chinese ones in the world because the US are not there anymore. Now they're all commercial. So it's also a strategy to appear and to emerge on the market. So, in Europe we are challengers, so it's also all in our own interest also to publish a lot open source on that. So I'm sorry of not having at all a religious view on open source here. It's a very basic approach to the market. So that's how I see the evolution.
And you're right, at the RAISE Summit 2 days ago, for the first time, Quen was having a booth, Huawei was having a booth, so it was Alibaba Cloud also with Quen. So it's new, right? It's new that they didn't come so much. Now they're really the heart of it and promoting it. And I don't know if you've seen, but recently Airbnb burned all their IT cash in 4 months because of tokens. They claimed that, like at the beginning of the year. And so they said they will switch to Quen. And Airbnb said they would switch to Quen, right? So there is a big movement, and even here in Europe, for this model that costs too much. So yeah, so just to give you a hint about what's going on there. So on the value chain, I think you would be then the second one before the end use case. Like how for you it has changed the way you operate the tools and you advise industries?
I think we have a little different approach because we are started from the legacy from the industry most of the time, and we need to adapt about that. And of course, and we have different strategy based on if we are using closed open model, what kind of openness you have on the different topic. What I would like to say also is that we are not focusing only on the model itself. We are thinking about at system level. So we are thinking about system meaning, of course, the data set, and we all do think that data set is key model, but also the business logic around that. And we're also working on the life cycle of the system. So we talk a lot about how to build something, but what we are also interested in is to see how we can create a system, build the system, evaluate the system, and see how the system is behave in operation in the long term. So this is all the life cycle of the system we are looking at. Being said, in terms of technology and research, we are, again, as I said, we are more focusing on the tooling around model. And we have different strategy. For example, if you are using closed or open weight model, for example, we have some technology in order to assess trustworthy, for example, robustness, uncertainty quantification, and so on. Of course, the most open your model is, you have more latitude to define different strategy. So, of course, if you have the complete definition of architecture of a model, you can do a lot of things more. If you have the training model, training strategy, training method, of course, it gives you some opportunity, of course, to develop new technology on that. Of course, it gives you also some strength because we're also working on cybersecurity, and poisoning data is something we are looking at, and we are also developing some technology to address some of what we call adversarial attacks. And of course, as we can do it both on black box and on white box, but of course, if your model is more open, of course, you can do more of things, but in two ways, meaning you can do bad things, but you can protect against bad things also better as well. So again, we have a kind of tactical strategy, and we deal with what we have, in fact.
Yeah. What's your point of view when you deal with the end users and customers?
And on open source models, just a comment on revenues, and we are profitable from day one.
Yeah, man.
As a tech agency.
You're so 2019.
Yeah.
Why you would make profit if you can, raise money and burn it, right? So again, why I'm saying that, it's a mantra of Silicon Valley, and especially the Silicon Valley TV show, where an entrepreneur say to his investor, "Oh, we're making to make revenue," and he stands up and say, "No revenue. If you make revenue, you will be just a 2x or 3x valuation company. If you don't make revenue, you can be a 10x or 100x, because it will be projected revenue, So that's the joke entrepreneurs say about making revenue, right? No, of course, but congrats, so that's good, that pays the bills and that pays the salaries. So yeah, but then about our topic, like how do you see this value chain and open source, and do you see actually gaps in the value chain?
Yeah, I think open source models offer us more competition, and in the 12 months, they've become a reasonable alternative, and we put open weight models in production workloads right now. Just to give you a really concrete example, 1 year ago we deployed GPT-4o, which was a frontier model at that time, for a Swiss company on insurance-related things, really sensible topics. And they decided that it was not okay to use, the hyperscaler that gives you the contractual obligations. They say it does not go outside Switzerland and so on. And we switched recently to an open model, an open weight models. And we have
which one?
Yeah,
which one?
Qwen.
Qwen?
Yeah, Qwen and GLM OCR, I think, in a in an agentic pipeline, and we have decreased the cost 20 times, same performance, and just 1 year gap and difference. So it's really from this point of view, it's really interesting that we have the competition. So from the Chinese model and also from the French models, we hope so. We see, I would differ from Olivier on the compute side, because we still have outside the small language models area, we find it difficult to have, multi-GPU inference if we want to deploy LLMs with the large language model. We need more compute, we need availability. It's still not really affordable for us and for our clients. So we still have a gap in compute if we want to deploy these open weights and open source models for our customers.
So I have a question. I'll be back maybe on you, Olivier, but actually, Pierre-Carl Langlais, who is the co-founder of PlayS with Nastadia, had this great keynote presentation where he said, the model is the product. The model is the product. So some people are totally in favor of that. Some people are totally not in favor of that, right? Especially, in the debate where, for example, some people love Claude or love ChatGPT or GPT-4 at the time. People were not agreeing when they were changing it or removing it. GPT-5, whatever. And so there is this huge thing between the brands of models versus just the tokens. So it's about models, brands versus, no, we care about the tokens, right? So what's your thing? Because Dragon LLM has a good brand. At least we know the Dragon, What's your take on this when you talk to end users? Do they care about the brand, or they just care about the token and token price?
So just to come back on compute, I was talking about compute for training, not for inference, right? So for inference, there is indeed some shortage of machines in Europe that is being addressed to facilitate inference of bigger models. Coming back to your topic of, is it a product? For me, the question is the use case of a client. Okay, that's what matters. And in our company, we, 10 years ago, I thought naively at the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey that, okay, we are going to create models. And we were focusing on the financial sector because I spent 20 years in banking industry. And I thought naively that the banks are going to buy the models directly, in 2014. Okay, that was much too early. So we needed to do a SaaS interface and an AI system, effectively. So we went on building an AI system. So since then, we've always had this kind of double kind of production in our company. We have the people who develop the AI system, and they are agnostics in terms of the model they're going to use for the clients. Either they use the models that our model team is going to create, or they're going to say, no, for the use case we're dealing, we don't think it's better. We may want to use Qwen, we may want to use something else. It's all self-hosted on our own servers, also to be safe from the Cloud Act. We've been always on the sovereign aspect. So for me, you see, I'm not sure. Obviously, there's different topics in your question. Either we're talking about the brand of a company. Indeed, the brand does matter. But then after that, it all comes back to the UI. How are you using it? And you know, the scientists in the company are doing those very complex assessment methodology for models, and then they ask me to look at in a blind way to different models, and I'm going, so I obviously prefer this one, and they say, but you're stupid, the answers are wrong, the other one is obviously the right one. I say, yes, but this one, the answers are shorter, and I prefer to have shorter answer. So you see, it's all those kind of perception and specific criteria that are very hard to assess on how, so, you know, of course you may prefer Claude like you prefer a BMW, or, you know, you on Alfa Romeo. You know, there's a lot in that aspect, but for me, the key point is the usage. How do you move into the industry progressively? You know, this kind of technology has been used very much by individual people first, but if you look at the businesses, there's still a lot of areas where it needs to move into production, and there are a lot of constraints in terms, you know, how do we use that, the responsibility, data security, the computing power to use this. This is expensive. How are we doing this? And my objective for me is how do we make this technology evolve at a production level in businesses in Europe in a sovereign and safe manner.
Okay, you wanna?
Yeah, fully agree with that. I think it's really depending on the use case. Personally, I'm working with, you know, Thales, for example, Safran, which is part of the association, but also Airbus and so on, Air Liquide also. And it's really dependent on the use case. And I think it's always a trade-off between, you know, performance, let's say that cost, of course, sustainability, customization, and compliance again. And so I think it's always a trade-off, and it's really dependent on the use case and the company that is taking this into account, I guess.
So you never seen end users, industrial or companies, for example, who say, okay, I want to use Mistral models, or I want to use, I don't want to use, for example, Quad models, or I don't want to use this. So did you have this discussion at some point or never?
I think it's not the question, I think. It's even not a question about open versus closed model. I think it's really, again, what we want to build, what we want to achieve. In terms of compliance, also, it's only what you want to promise to your customer. I think the customer is key in this industry. So again, I think if it's not a black and white answer, I guess. Each time you need to define your system, explicitly define what is the purpose, what you would like to offer to your customer, and then try the relevant solution, whatever it is.
As an advisor, I understand your point, but I know that some companies are doing the marketing to the end user, you know, like Intel Inside. Do you remember the Intel Inside thing, you know?
I think it's again, it's a promise you are doing to your customer and end user, because of course we talk about that later on, about, you know, customer insight and how you introduce in your system the end user. It's depend about what you want to promote, what you want to sell to your customers and users.
So I don't want to disappoint you, and
Please.
Everyone is going to say, no, it's
no.
not a model.
Disappoint me.
I think we work with a lot of mid-caps and small businesses, and I would say around 10% of them say, I want Mistral. So bravo to Mistral.
Don't disappoint me, it happens sometimes.
Yeah, but it's only 10%. Yeah.
No.
In 90% of cases, we are in charge of you know, counseling our clients and evaluate the best balance between cost and performance. And so we have to do this work before choosing the model. And they don't give us strict constraints about which model provider we should use.
Of course, my point is not to be wrong or right. My point is to just to put some light on the discussion. And the thing is, there is a branding.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's
there is a branding that is important, and open models, in my opinion, that's my opinion, but should invest on branding to be recognized for where they're good at. So this is why I was asking that. So, but at least what you say, large majority, the name of the open models, the open weight models doesn't care, right? The people don't ask you that, right?
There is a trend, I think, in the community of developers, you know, to have alternatives to Cloud Code and OpenAI Codex. So I think the last release of GLM 5.2 with close performance to Opus 4.8 was really interesting. So I think there is a beginning of a trend here.
The closed models, they're really good at branding. You know, mythos, fable. What, you know, it's more esoteric. Like the next one will be lies or whatever, mythos, fable. You know, at some point. But no, the thing they're really good at branding. I wanted to know if the open source models brands were strong. No, they're not. So this is what I understood. Yeah. So you want to add some? I see you with your
Oh, no, one thing also to take into account is that there's more and more work being done on LLM router, you know, so that for each kind of, you've got an AI system, and for each kind of task that arrives, then there's going to be a router which is going to be select the best model behind to do that. So that kind of also, you know, this is something that is developing as well.
So I have a question. So accept the performance from the use case, which is, I think, from what you said, is key. You know, first it has to be the key, right?
Definitely.
Definitely. So for two models who have comparable performances, what are the things you look at open models that can make a difference for end users? You know, is it the trust of the data sets? Is it the license, the biases, the origin of the models, the governance?
So you've got the big talk at the moment, which is sovereignty. Okay. So that's one big criteria, which is an element that comes into the picture. You've got your that's one element, which doesn't mean the same thing if you're a government or if you're a business. Effectively, if you're a business, you just want to be tied with one provider. You want to make sure you keep a multiplicity of choice for what you want to do. But fundamentally, if you're a business and you want to choose your model, okay, you may look at the name of a company and so, but in the end, it's how much is it going to cost me? What is the performance I'm going to get? Is it safe? Is it robust? Where do I reach on my KPI? Am I at 98%? In that case, I don't care if there's another frontier model that arrives. I still can carry on this or not. It's all those elements that are important. What is my infrastructure? Is it going to run on my servers? Or not, and if it's an open source model, a big advantage of open source model is that you can run them on premise as well.
And you can customize it.
Yeah. But my point is the difference with open source, because I was talking with Jean-Baptiste Kempf, who is the tech lead of VLC Media Player, you know, the most used actually European application in the world with 600 million users, right? And he was telling me, and I asked him, like, if we fork VLC tomorrow, right? You know, if I rebuild VLC with AI, right? He said, I don't care, because why people use VLC is they actually trust the guys and the girls who have been doing it for 25 years and will continue to do it, maintaining it and everything. So in an open source project, you believe also about the people behind it and everything. With a model, when it's out, you know? If I use whatever open source model and it will never move, I can build my old stack on it and I don't have to follow the updates right there. So when you say about sovereignty, like all models are sovereign as long as they're open, right? No? Don't think so?
You can see it like this, but then after it depends how you use it. You could have bias that you want to have. You know, if you're a government, LLMs are a bit the new way to look at encyclopedia, to share knowledge, and to influence how people think. You would obviously prefer a model where you have some comfort in thinking that the data that was used to create that model reflects your culture and reflects the way you're thinking in your country and your continent. That's where it could make a difference.
Do you also see that in end user customer? The biases are part of the discussion or not yet?
Not yet, I think, but the licensing issues are. So, you know, it's business to business.
Yeah.
And they need to have the confidence in using the different products.
Yeah, to continue on that, I think vendor locking is something we need to tackle, definitely from the industrial perspective. We also have some constraints for something, for example, again, I'm working a lot with in the defense sector, and ITAR, for example, regulation, US regulation is something definitely we need to take into account. So it's another criteria that even it's closed or if it's open, we need to make sure that we are ATAR free, for example.
So you said sovereignty, respecting regulations, you know, like maybe data sets that have respected regulation also in the process. What else in the discussion, or it's over, you don't have any more things? Cost at inference, or?
Yes, definitely cost also. As you said, I think it's, I would say like this, performance definitely, cost, customization, compliance with standard regulation. Yes, basically.
I think there may be a trend also where you're going to see bigger and bigger specializations of models, where you have, the expertise. There are more and more companies who have expertise. Training compute will be becoming more available. And then what you're going to figure out is that it's going to become more and more common for companies to emerge and start to fine-tune and create models for specific use cases, and you're going to have this multiplicity of models. It will all stem from open source. Then will they remain open source, or will they be made commercial on that aspect? But that's, for me, a trend that's probably going to emerge as well. All those multiplicity. Do you need a huge frontier model to address a specific use case in your company? Certainly not.
This is exactly what I'm talking when I talk about customization. Sometimes it's also to take into account embeddability, frugality, green aspect also. So this is the kind of things. And most of the time, it's easier to do it with open source model, or let's say that closed model. So yes, it's part also of the different criteria we need to take into account while identifying which kind of model we need to use.
And then coming back to your branding topic, which seems to be one of your key topics. In fact, to be honest, when a new model comes out, its reputation is made within a week in the scientific community. And then that spreads from there. And that's, and then this does last until the next one comes out.
Yeah, also benchmarks,
yes.
So companies don't care about the benchmarks. They care?
Of course. And again, benchmark, it's not only one time. Again, this is very key for us. It's to see how your system, in general speaking, is behaved in the long term. And we didn't talk about drift, for example. It's a key issue for a customer. How your system will behave after 3, 4, 5, even weeks. I can give an example. For example, I was working with a automotive company which is deploying a small machine learning, but I think it's interesting to have a testimonial for a real use case. They're using some anomaly detection on welding, for example. Okay. And what we observed, and it's one of the key testimonial, is that it was almost impossible for them to have a system that is able to have a precision after 3 weeks because of the drift. And the question is, are we able to compete? Are we able to build and train new model in a speed that we can replace the model in production that is not efficient? So I think it's very important for us not to consider it, one evaluation, one time at the beginning, at the building phase. We need to think about all the system, and moreover, you need to have. We talk about governance and phase. It's key for us, for example. Definitely, from a long-term perspective, you need to be able to have a governance of your system, identify when you need to put a system in production. You need to constantly monitor your system based on different criteria. Precision is one, but also from our perspective, we need to think about trustworthy again. So, and you need to identify when it's time to change your model or to deactivate your model and so on and so on. So we need also to take sometimes I see a lot of benchmark ones, but to be honest, when I talk with industrial, it's more monitoring long-time perspective, which is key.
I think the customers need, the feedback loop to say, okay, it still works. My model is still working. They don't change model every day. They don't say, okay, there is a new brandy model from Quen and so on. I need to do that. They are not in this mood. They're really concrete.
But you, Olivier, you know how building a model can be hard and it can be a skill. But with common crawl and common corpus and all these data sets, Hugging Face and making them more available, or GitHub AI or whatever platform, do you see company actually jumping into making their own models because the barrier to entry is lower? Did you see company trying to do it? Thanks to open weight model, or?
I think it will come, and notably I think with the reinforcement learning trend, because with reinforcement learning we can define objectives, verifiable objectives, and it's really a link to our use cases. We need to achieve that objective, which is to validate the instruction of a dossier and really concrete use cases. And if we have this capacity with more compute, more training compute, fine-tuning compute precisely, I think we'll be in the mood to fine-tune models for our clients and with RL training, for example. Yeah.
Do you see also that on your own?
Yeah, fine-tuning, especially, again, not only for performance, again, it's might, but just the kind of things we are looking at, for example, is to retrain or to specialize a model to reinforce the security aspect or a robustness aspect or quantification, uncertainty quantification aspect and so on. And even explainability, we don't talk about explainability a lot, but so it's not, again, I think we need to find a way to re-entrain or to customize or to specialize some of the model, not only for precision, but also for different criteria. It's a key aspect, definitely.
So I would have a different view here in terms of simplicity of doing this. In the company that we joined recently, so OVH, which is a very strong industrial company. One of the first questions that I was asked was, okay, how can we industrialize the creation process of models and the fine-tuning process for models? And my answer was actually, we can't. I've tried for 10 years. I don't manage because the state of the art is changing every 3 weeks. Each time we create a new model, we use different tools, different methodology, different assessment methodologies. Now earlier on we talked about agentic. We need to create this kind of RL agentic data, which is extremely complex and heavy to collect. You therefore start to use a lot of compute now, not to train the model, but to create data that you're going to use to train the model. And this will evolve further. The state of the art is still evolving very fast. And interestingly enough, we were contacted also by massive banks who have 200 people in their AI factory, and they come to us and, oh, we're going to need your help to fine-tune models. We're going to stop trying because it's a shitty business, and you're doing that. So it's quite painful, and we are not geared to do that, because it's really trial and error all the time. You train, you have a pre-training for the big base model, and then when you do the post-training, then when you do the specialization, and even at the specialization level, you take your data, you specialize, you check the KPI, you realize, oh, it's not there yet. Okay, we need to find more data to gear it in a different way. You try again, you damage another kind of benchmark. While you did this, you do it again. So maybe you're going to try 20 times before you reach this. And that does require, and then after, with time and energy and skill, you're progressively getting there. But it's hard still at this stage to industrialize. There are pipelines that are getting updated and created for this, but that's still, we're still in R&D, in fact.
So, agree. Definitely, this is what we observe. For example, we have a lot of projects at the R&D level, a lot of initiatives, but when we need to, and our target is the operational business division, and what we see is sometimes very difficult even for larger, bigger group to transform something into something that is operational.
For example, there are two known cases. For example, JP Morgan Chase in the US, they have spent dozens of millions into trying to fine-tune their own models and everything, generalist model, and they say, okay, no, we'll go back to closed models. At least that was their decision. Also in France, we had Société Générale also, who had a strong movement, and they say, okay, it's quite complex, it's a job, it's a full-time job, in a specialty, as you say. Maybe just before the questions, does small language models change the thing, the ability maybe to company just to do smaller models on smaller use cases and actually build the models themselves or fine-tune them? Or, yeah, did you see that?
Yes, definitely. For example, if we talk about naval group, if you want to embed a system in a ship, for example, you have specific constraints in terms of power, in terms of space, and so on.
In a ship, like a boat?
A ship in a boat,
oh,
yeah, definitely.
Not a chip?
Not a chip, a ship, yeah. Naval
not
group.
A sheep?
A sheep, not, yeah.
Okay.
Let's
French, we have a pronunciation in French is hard,
let's
right?
say a boat, yeah.
Ship.
A naval group, you know the company. And yes, so you have embeddability constraint, you have a lot of constraint, definitely. And of course, why do we have to use a large model if we can do something that is almost, you can do something better with small and maybe with the same performance, almost, definitely. let's say, not the same performance, but it's comply with your initial requirement, let's say. So definitely.
I think for specific tasks, we have now small language models and framework to retrain them and fine-tune them. And I think we will see, in the coming months, some way to do it more easily and in a more affordable way, I think. Yeah.
So maybe just for...
It's not the big LLM from the banking sector that you want to compete with the leading industry and the frontier models. It's really the concrete use case, extraction of some kind of information, classification, basic classification. Still fine-tuning works here, and when you don't have direct results but verifiable results, but RL is coming into the equation, and I think we've got now open source framework that we can use to do it. And
classification is a good example because typically that's the funny part, for the banks who want to use or in some, want to use API and frontier model, but for that they need to make sure that's not confidential data, that it's not. So therefore they need classifiers to make sure to identify what they can send out. And that's one case where they indeed can look at that, and it's not that complicated to develop this, particularly with their own data. But other things, like we had this use case for a bank where they came to us saying, well, look, we want to do analysis of incoming Swift messages. So Swift is the old kind of communication method for the banks. It's been created in the 70s. It's very basic. It's written in all capital letters in messages. And we want to have a model that does analyze the free message that we receive through Swift. Problem is that, it's our legacy system. It has to be a model that runs on CPU server and be good enough to analyze that. So that's where you come into, what was shown earlier on by Linagora, and that's down to the 4 or 5 companies in France who have a possibility to develop, therefore, those kind of models. Because that they probably could not do because of the infrastructure constraints that they have for something which is relatively still complex.
So please prepare your questions right now, and the time prepare your question. Just for, it's a trap, right? But Olivier, I'll ask you, like, down to what size is a small model? What is the size of a small model? Can you try to answer that? It's a trap.
Yeah, it's a trap because now we're doing a mixture of expert models. So if I'm telling you it's a 7 billion model, but active 1, is it a 7 or 1? It's
he escaped the trap. Nice one. So yeah, we have time for a few questions from the audience. I'm losing my voice, but I think I will keep it until 6 p.m. Who has some questions about how open models are? Oh no, it's just a fan. It's just a fan. No question here? If you don't have a question, okay. Else I have a question. So I have a question that maybe inspire you about the biases. I was discussing with Christophe Henner, the previous head of Wikimedia Foundation, who said that he took the example of Grokipedia, the Elon Musk Wikipedia competitor generated by AI. But he said, okay, Grokipedia, people don't care. But the data set, the synthetic data set he's creating is good, has some use case, and it will be open data license, And again, it may have some biases, of course, biases by the AI and biases by Elon Musk directly. He showed that in the past he could make biases directly into his models. But he said, for example, if I use it for code, if I use it for other things, I will not care about the 0.0001% historical bias, because I will use some skills or some part of the data set that are for industrial use cases or whatever. So we begin to have, and again, I don't want to go philosophy in here, but to an epistemic fight or thing, because we may accept by using some part of the models, edge biases, right? Because it's not what we're used for, but over and over we may forget. Do you think I don't know if, I'm sure companies don't care for now, but if we use more and more models, at the end we will forget, the biases at the origin. So it's because nobody asked the question that I allowed myself to ask this one.
think there was a funny benchmark on Grok recently, and that showed that it was not really conservative because of the the different tweets that you have in the, and it was influenced by the users. So it does show that the bias can change if you think of it with the data. So I don't know if
especially because actually when you're on x.com, for the people who are still there, when you do annotations, actually you update the Grokipedia datasets, right? So it has some human signal, it has some things. That's what makes it valuable sometimes for use cases. It's a tough question. You don't have, you can have no point of view.
It's a tough question, the topic of biases, but you have to go back to the source of the question. What is a bias? Okay, we all have biases. When you create a model, you have physical constraints that you're limited to. I mentioned compute, I mentioned data, and so on. Typically, you see when we created our last small foundation model, the guys were coming to me saying, well, Olivier, we have this constraint in terms of size of data we're going to put into the model because we have that amount of compute. Those are the various data sets. Should I put the data set in Albanian in it or not? If I say no, the model will not know nothing about Albanian language, Albanian culture, or anything that will be a strong bias. Okay. So you see, that's a difficult question on that. When you're creating a model, you're making choices, and that's on your, not only on the data set you take, because you have several levels of training the model. The first level is really just what you could say the general knowledge, even if I don't like that term, where you put the text, that's coming back to the command crawl question, the pre-training, and at that stage your model is only able to put a few words after the previous ones. And then you've got the post-training where you start to really teach the model some tasks, and then the tasks are, this is a summary, this is a translation, this is a rewriting, this is code, this is handling a chatbot, this is all those kind of things. And that's where you see the bias can be a bit more behavioral somehow, a bit stronger there as well. And there, again, you may create involuntarily some bias because you're limited also on the data set you find. It's easier today to find data to pre-train a model than to find data for the post-training aspect, particularly as we come into the RL agentic aspect, where it's even more complicated because there you really have to create harness and specific kind of handling of behavior within harness to be able to answer these calling tools and all those kind of stuff. So, is a tool, if you're coming back to the banking industry, a tool which is going to favor the usage of a Bloomberg terminal rather than other source of information, that's a bias. Okay, so that's you see that's a tricky.
So we call invent a new model called Jon Snow, and the brand will be you know nothing, Jon Snow, right? No, I'm joking. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Thank you. Wow, I'm losing it. Thank you. We reached our time, but thank you very much for this panel about open source for research. We can have some applause here.